Thank you for joining us again and welcome back to our channel. If you are joining for the first time, we appreciate your time as always. It is always advisable for us to keep Africa's geostrategic discussions on how the continent of Africa interact with its global partners from around the world. It is important to note that the United States of America has come to realize that it is not invisible the way it thought if you look at strategic options. While we continue to see Africa, as Rwanda at the moment and the Democratic Republic of the Congo, as shaping some form of a peace deal, as we continue to see the country of Burkina Faso being lambasted at the United States of American Senate through an unfounded allegation. More importantly, Africa's strategic partner, the country of China, have refused the United States of America's leverage regards to its trade war, as we see China standing up the United States of America and the US to an extent is backing down. More importantly, with regards to this particular episode, the country of South Africa has demonstrated leadership and has proven to the United States of America that it is not backing down, despite that the US is a very important strategic trade partner. What is so surprising this week is the reason why the United States of America has completely changed its tone regards South Africa, and to an extent the United States previously accused South Africa about some bad things happening in the country. As we continue to see this geostrategic relationship building and figuring out how these two countries can work together moving forward. In the past couple of hours, as we also how geostrategic involvement by the continent of Africa is winning. Like I said in previous episode, Africa was laughed at when the delegation went to the country of Ukraine and Russia. More importantly, we continue to see how Africa is making sure that its voice is not going anywhere soon. I have a couple of videos to play, but it's important to note that the country of South Africa has reopened its discussions with the country of the United States of America, talking about the two leaders having a phone conversation. And more importantly, Mr. Ramaphosa spoke to Russian leader while he was receiving the president of Ukraine. It is important to know that the continent of Africa is observing this particular relationship between South Africa and the country of the United States of America, as the AGOA trade agreement, known as the African Growth and Opportunity Act, is important now. It's on life support, like I said. Geopolitical analysts are very skeptical with regards to renewal. However, we are observing what's going to happen. But more importantly, before we roll out this particular discussion for today, let's start this with regards to the South African-based television station Expert, who to an extent just narrowed it down for us why the United States of America has changed its tone all of a sudden.
And it's quite interesting because it speaks about a change in tone when you're looking at, what is taking place in the U.S. For example, the Secretary of Treasury there being quoted earlier on as saying that America first doesn't mean America alone. And the U.S. Secretary of Treasury, again, being part of that meeting with South Africa there as the presidency or as the president of the G20. It does speak somewhat, Sophie, to a change in tone as opposed to what we saw happening earlier.
And remember, this G20 meeting, it was on the margins of the IMF and the World Bank in Washington, the seat of government of the United States of America. And therefore, for that representative at the highest level in the U.S., attending that G20 meeting that was chaired by South Africa as the presidency of the G20, it's another indication that you can work in a better way to improve the relations, particularly bilateral. Because right now, the issue of the tariffs, perhaps it was a blessing in disguise, because it led to a situation where America, they do realize that they are not an island and they are not this mighty country that everybody is talking about. They are also vulnerable, and countries have evolved. There are new alliances. China is becoming very powerful. And also, so you have to speak to everybody. The arrogance will still be there, but I think this was a real historic week where America understood that you cannot just be a bully. you have to interact with everybody. When they walk back on China and the tariffs, and a statement by the US President on the Federal Reserve Chairman, Jerome Powell, saying he's not going to fire him, that speaks to realizing your mistakes at a very crucial time. But also, you spoke about President Trump earlier on, what he posted on social media in relation to Russia. I think the meeting of President Ramaphosa and Zelensky, many people were watching. America was hoping that it will broker peace and it will be about the Americans. Now you see smaller countries playing a role, and both countries, Russia and Ukraine, saying we are willing to have Africa and perhaps South Africa as part of the three major role players, that is America, Europe, South Africa, and of course the multilateral institutions such as the United Nations, as main players in ensuring that we have this ceasefire and the process to the lasting solution.
South Africa. Understand the importance of the United States of America in terms of trade, collaboration, working together in several areas. The United States of America's U-turn in regards to its relationship with South Africa, talking about the countries doing some bad things, and more important, the tariff issues across the continent of Africa. African nations have come to the realization that the United States may not be a strategic partner as they thought, and for that reason, they are widening their options, as we see Burkina Faso moving so closely with regards to Russia and China, and looking for alternatives with regards to the current partnerships. However, the United States of America failed to understand that African countries are facing tremendous challenges, looking at a merging population and a growing middle class. More importantly, South Africa, a country that to an extent, a bigger GDP in the continent of Africa, that has opened its markets for US products and goods and services. And for South Africa, who to an extent feel that the United States might be a big player, and to an extent that South Africa will not abandon its relationship with Russia and China because it has to accommodate US's own demands. This is the problem with geopolitical engagement around the continent of Africa. And more importantly, South African officials still feel that the country of South Africa still have a huge potential in terms of their collaboration and working together with the country of the United States of America.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa described his call with United States President Donald Trump as cordial. He spoke to Trump ahead of a meeting with Ukrainian leader Vladimir Zelensky in Pretoria on Thursday.
The call between myself and President Trump was long in the making, and I last spoke to President Trump in January as he was going to be inaugurated, when I congratulated him. President Trump and I also agreed to meet soon to address the various other matters regarding our relations between South Africa and the United States.
The engagement follows months of tensions over South Africa's genocide case against Israel, a key US ally. Unfounded claims of land grabs and human rights abuses against white Afrikaner farmers have also stirred controversy. Washington has shown disdain for South Africa's race-based land reform laws aimed at redressing historical imbalances, sensitive issues Ramaphosa will have to address when he meets Trump.
It's not something which emerged now suddenly as a perception about South Africa. The conservative groups in South Africa did their homework for a long time about this and did try to influence key American persons. And it will take quite some time in order to counter that.
Ramaphosa has appointed a special envoy and a ministerial committee to help ease tensions and focus on trade-related matters. The committee, made up of international relations, trade and agriculture ministers, is expected to meet soon with US officials. They are pushing to maintain preferential access to the world's biggest economy and to have proposed import tariffs dropped.
But we're not pretending like these are not going to be difficult discussions. We appreciate, and as I think the rest of the world appreciates, that there are difficult discussions to be had with the US, and we're going to have to engage on that basis.
Pretoria has a long-standing relationship with Washington dating back to the late 18th century and remains confident of a positive outcome.
Well, we've always been optimistic that ultimately the two heads of state will be able to engage. And we are optimistic that over time, through a process, the relations between South Africa and the United States will get back to what they were before.
Details have been scant on when or where Ramaphosa and Trump will meet. South Africa will be eager to smooth over relations ahead of the G20 Leadership Summit in November, when the US is set to take over the 2026 chairmanship. But so far, Trump has shown little interest in attending. Julie Shara, CGTN, Cape Town.
The change of tone is a very important thing that experts around the world are observing very closely, as Mr. Zelensky himself, while in South Africa, came to realize that the country of South Africa does have leverage, a big player in the global south, like I've pointed out, and a very important partner across the continent of Africa, a large voice for Africa's own perspective in several areas in the United Nations and more importantly in the BRICS community. It is vitally important to understand that South Africa perspective of the United States of America will not change. A very important partner, but again, the continent of Africa is observing this relationship closely. But the question lies is, why has the United States of America changed its tone all of a sudden? Is it because of Chinese standing up to the country of the United States of America's trade war? Or the United States of America has come to realize that the peace deal between Russia and Ukraine is not so simple as the way the United States of American leader thought? However, other experts see it differently.
Let's now welcome Professor Christopher Isike, Director of the African Center for the Study of the United States at the University of Pretoria, to further unpack this. Professor, always good to have you on the show. Welcome. So what do you make of these latest developments, and just how hopeful are you in the success of this reconfiguration process between the two nations?
Well, thank you for having me, and good afternoon to your viewers. I think that's probably, we can say, it's one of the tangible outcomes of the Zelensky visit to South Africa. I mean, this call, like President Ramaphosa said, long in the making. Is the second time they're speaking since when Ramaphosa called to congratulate him in January. So that's a positive for South Africa-US relations, given the tensions we have seen in the last couple of months.
I mean, why the sudden change? And now, Professor, I mean, some speculators have said that it's, of course, due to the recent notable absence of Elon Musk at his side. But I mean, let's talk at the potential reasons for this move. Could it be the isolation that, of course, now Trump is feeling from his trade wars, perhaps?
Yeah, that is more like it, and especially with China, the fact that China is not giving in, one, and two, also the fact that the peace deal that he was hoping to get between Ukraine and Russia is not coming through, and it's really increasingly frustrating him. Although he's been in charge of that process, I see he's beginning to realize that this is not something that he can simply do alone. South Africa has always remained a critical factor for the US in trying to resolve this through its membership of BRICS and its closeness to Putin. So appealing to every force of good that can impact on the key players in this conflict is a useful, practical strategy to adopt. But this is more about Trump getting frustrated and looking for other ways out of this.
But I mean, you did in fact call it, Professor, that should everyone leave Trump alone, he will likely have no choice but to reach out. But looking at the current South African relations with the United States, be it trade or diplomatic, going forward, what lessons should South Africa have learned in terms of dealing with the complexities of such unexpected terrain?
Well, one is to be ready, to be, true to its principles, ensure that the principles that guide its foreign policy always align with its foreign policy actions and inactions, as the case may be. I think also the tendency, and this is not just to South Africa, there has been a certain tendency to kind of, if I'll use the word, undermine the United States in ways that they would not necessarily undermine China or Russia. I think the realization that maybe that was because we didn't really pay attention to how much buttering of our bread was coming from the US, despite the proclivity towards seeing them as imperialists. So now that some of these aids have gone, we realize how important they have been, no matter how small we think they are. And then it makes us realize that these relationships are important. But again, too, we are not going to be, dictated to by these relationships in themselves, because the best non-aligned approach will be to be friends with everyone and be able to do business and benefit from every kind of relationship. And the US cannot fall that if we are consistent, in our principles and behavior.
Africa countries are currently at the moment at a crossroad. They are beginning to re-energize themselves in terms of trade and making sure that they can work together. The continent can no longer rely on its strategic partners. As we see, China has come under tremendous pressure with regards to tariffs, despite standing up to the United States of America. Russia has its own concern at the moment, but the Russians have said the continent of Africa is a very vital location for their particular relationship, which is not going anywhere soon. The United States of America, to an extent, looking at the first couple of months of the administration, has ruffled feathers across the continent of Africa, and African countries are observing this relationship with a grain of salt. So to point out, nobody should fool you that African countries are not looking at the United States of America's strategic engagement with the particular way they used to. They have realized that the US may not be a strategic partner, like I pointed out in previous conversation. More importantly, the engagement with regards to South Africa's delegation to the country of Ukraine and Russia has demonstrated that the continent has risen and is asking questions and want to take a seat at the international level based on its strategic involvement. I want to thank you for watching. Let me know what you think the reason why the United States of America has suddenly changed its tone. Is it as a result of the geopolitical shift, or the US has realized that it is not invisible as it thought? For now, I will be looking forward to meeting you soon in our next episode. Have a good day. Bye-bye.